Hi folks, we hope you'll enjoy the upcoming answers to this hot question. What movie would be better if it didn't have a happy ending? The Hobbit, but not in the way you think. The big issue with those movies is that they focus too much on the ring, when in reality, it wasn't super dangerous at that point. The whole point was that Gandalf doesn't suspect anything yet. It should have just been a magic ring until the very last scene, where Bilbo stands at his porch, and all of a sudden starts frantically looking for his ring, only to give it the look. Bam! Cut to black. None of this full circle crap, cut out old Bilbo and Frodo, just end the happy fairy tale with the revelation that something is wrong. Gandalf suspected something, but he didn't know what. At that point he didn't know much of ring lore, but he certainly knew about the 3, he had 1, lent to him by Círdan the Shipwright, and probably knew about the 9. So when he finally learned about the ring, remember that Bilbo didn't tell the dwarves until Gandalf had left them at the edge of Mirkwood, he probably suspected that it was one of the 7, or possibly another one unaccounted for, maybe created an imitation of the rings he knew, or at a long shot one of the 9 whose history he got wrong. But, one of the wonderful things about the books, that didn't really make it into either trilogy of the movies, is how Hobbit-centric it is. Everything that Frodo and Sam do is described in detail. Almost everything that Merry and Pippin do is described in detail, the only truly lacking bit is a description of the Ents. Most of what Legolas and Gimli do is well described, but from less of a protagonist view. Aragorn's actions are sometimes told second-hand or after the fact, as when he takes the paths of the dead. Gandalf's actions are often told in flashback, his imprisonment by Saruman, for example. And Boromir's actions are only described second-hand. This makes sense if you think of the book as being written by Frodo. He would have had long conversations with Sam and Merry and Pippin until he left to go over the sea. Legolas and Gimli probably visited often. Aragorn might have shown up once, and may have written his account down himself, but he was too busy being a king to give great detail. Boromir, alas. And Gandalf simply couldn't explain everything he did, both because trying to explain it would place a burden on the hobbits and because he simply wasn't good at explaining. War of the Worlds. No way the son makes it back alive. Was hoping someone would say this. I remember seeing it in theaters and enjoying myself. Then that scene happens and I instantly got turned off from the movie. I'm pretty sure I'm correct saying literally everyone in the audience I saw it with groaned when the son showed up at the end. The son was also a massive dumb butthole. It would have made it better if he stayed dead, and Rachel died because of the tripod abduction. The original script to Mrs. Doubtfire apparently had the parents getting back together, but they decided to go with the ending we know today instead to show kids that the world doesn't end just because mom and dad stay apart. Speaking as someone who grew up with parents that did nothing but shout and argue, I think the ending they went for is the happy one. By the end, they divorce and can be civil to each other. If they get back together, they're just back to square one. On a slightly separate note, I remember at the time thinking that it's okay for your parents to get divorced because of how the film laid it out. Although my parents didn't divorce till my adult years, I like to think that this film would have helped many kids not feel so guilty or shameful about their parents separating. I'm trying to remember from my childhood, but I am pretty sure divorce was a lot less common back then. Legend of Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp. The last 20 minutes of the film tie up all the loose ends, but they don't match the atmosphere of the rest of the film. 4_hummus 2.5k points. One day ago it would have worked if they'd taken more time to establish his character as a good detective. They showed he was smart with science but he could have been more competent. 4ike name 37,704 points. One day ago, edited 22 hours ago yeah, I think they were trying too hard for humor to the extent that it hurt the storyline so it couldn't be well displayed. Wonder Woman. The lesson near the end is that the god of war doesn't exist and it's just men who are fighting without supernatural encouragement. Then the real god of war arrives and that lesson gets ignored. It would have been better movie if they left out the god of war and Wonder Woman couldn't do anything to stop man's violent nature. Yeah, they try to work around that by having him say stuff like, oh, I only nudged them, this is what they're really like. But yeah, it kinda undermines the whole narrative of a naive WW who has to discover that this is the way the world works when there is a literal god of war pulling strings. The Golden Compass. The movie specifically made the ending a happy one, deviating from the source material in a major way. The movie stopped early, it wasn't really much of an ending. The TV show is much better. Frozen 2. Arendelle should have been destroyed by that flood. And the townspeople would have been safe, they were moved out because the voice knew a flood was coming. Yep. I thought it was going to be a Thor, Ragnarok style ending where they just rebuild somewhere else. Why go through all the nonsense of the forest people if they aren't going to rebuild with the forest people? Hancock. That movie was so good until that bullpoop love story was slapped in there. Yeah, WTF was that? That came out of nowhere. I think they had different writers and that second half of the movie was a different writer from the first. Seriously, it's like they slapped two movies together. That's exactly what happened. The movie was in development during the writers' strike in the mid or late 00s. An old one, but My Fair Lady. It's based on the play Pygmalion by Bernard Shaw, and in that version Eliza realizes Henry treats her terribly and she deserves kindness, so she leaves him. The musical/movie version is the complete opposite of that and annoys me more than it should. Agreed, I thought her ending was kind of sad because of that. She lost all her old friends and her old life because she didn't fit into lower class society anymore, and now she has to settle for being married to her tutor who mainly likes showing her off and not her as a person. I don't think he ever intended to marry her. I think he just wanted her as a companion. She doesn't get a spouse, she doesn't fit in properly anywhere anymore. Pretty Woman. In the original ending, he just dumps her back in the street. But test audiences didn't like it, so they tweaked the movie and completely changed the ending. Made it a love story instead of what it was originally written as. Gives the whole movie a different meaning. The original was much more gritty. Julia Roberts was a drug addict in the original. I think an ending where they go their separate ways without her having to continue working the streets would have been a good one. He gives her the money he agreed to pay, she uses that to change her life. Both their lives are better after having met each other, but not necessarily and happily ever after together. Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Charlie and Grandpa Joe blatantly ignored Wonka's request that no one try the fuzzy lifting drink. The only reason Charlie was able to relinquish the gobstopper was because he was the only one to evade catastrophe. He, Moreso Grandpa Joe, were no more deserving for the empire than the other kids. Obligatory r/Grandpa Giat. The stage musical is good. The fizzy lifting drink isn't in there, instead at the end Wonka says that the gobstopper counts as Charlie's year's supply of candy and is going to leave him with nothing. Grandpa Joe is mad but Charlie's okay with it, but leaves some ideas for candy in Wonka's notebook, and that makes Wonka give him the factory. Also 3 of the other children are explicitly killed on stage. Veruca has her limbs torn off by squirrels, Violet explodes, and Augustus is ground to bits. Wonka complains that he's going to have to pick his bones out of the chocolate. I'd like to have more realistic romance movies where they build up a great romantic relationship, and all seems perfect and then he/she just leaves because of some poop. Because that's reality. Name some romantic movies where this should happen at the end. La La Land kinda does this. Yes, that's why I love that movie. Many people dislike it because of that, but it's finally something realistic. Not a movie, but Game of Thrones should have ended with the others overrunning Westeros because the humans couldn't put aside their differences and cooperate. Would have been way better than this. Who has a better story than? Bull poop lol. I think a suitable ending would have included losing King's Landing to the others. Waiting until the majority of the army was in King's Landing and then detonating the wildfire beneath the city, sacrificing the capital and a significant portion of the population to deal a massive blow to the others. Would have made the Mad Kings burn them all rant relevant. Pull another Hodor three-eyed raven past Warg event to reveal that that's what made him go mad. Back to the Future 3. Should have ended with Doc leaving a hidden message in the past for Marty, or delivering him another letter, thanking him for his friendship and letting him know that he's content living out his days with Clara. I hate that flying ducking steampunk train and Doc's Willy Wonka butt clothes and that creepy child. It still would have been a happy ending, I guess. Just a bittersweet one rather than an all-out goof. Not to mention, a train smashed into a effing car. Where are all the police, railroad representatives, insurance investigators? The area would have been closed off for days. Trains don't just plow through cars and keep going like nothing happened. The engineer probably thinks he killed somebody. Fight Club. Spoiler, in the book he winds up in a psychiatric hospital, which, let's face it, bit more realistic. Spoiler, he's convinced he's in heaven but the hospital is full of employees who are part of Project Mayhem and are plotting to get Tyler back. It's real frickerood. Chuck actually liked the movie ending, thought it was better than his original ending. That's true. Totally fair too? Rambo's original ending was great, where he ends up killing himself because of PTSD and not being able to readjust to society, etc. But it didn't test well with the focus group, so they changed it to be more positive, and then obviously it spawned sequels which turned the series a bit more campy and lost the original message a bit. But I think if they'd have kept the original ending, it might not have done so well in the theaters, but would be looked back on as a bit more of a poignant story and lost the original message a bit. I think you mean the later movies lost the original message completely. Butterfly Effect. The cliffhanger ending and bittersweet ending are better than the happy ending, as its alternative ending movie. It makes more sense with the overall plot. That baby ending was crazy. I thought it fit the movie best of all the endings though. That was the original ending I saw, and I was disappointed when I found out there were others. What would have been your answer or question? Leave it in the comments below. Slap that like and subscribe button for more, and check out the link in the video description for even more answers. Peace out, and catch you in the next video.